Despite what you might think at first, The Brutalist isn't a movie about just architecture. Released in late 2024, this film was nominated for a bazillion Oscars awards, an alleged masterpiece in modern cinema. And although it most certainly looks the part, just when the movie released, you might have seen some controversy surrounding it, specifically the use of AI to modify the voices of on-screen actors. Wait, they used artificial intelligence for what purpose? To make them sound more authentic, more human. How does this make any sense? Ironically, much like the building Lanslow made in the movie, before this film could see full completion, it had to undergo a long trek of delays and redesign, spanning over 7 years of production in total. This film was quietly developed over time, and pretty meticulously too. It's a dialogue-heavy, cinematically charged motion picture. With the way this movie was presented and crafted, you can easily tell that authenticity and purpose were at the core of its production. The Brutalist was made to represent the many flaws of humanity on both a personal and a societal level. As I said, this film isn't really about architecture, but more so about the psychology behind the mind of an architect. The many traumas and hardships that come with fleeing your home country, facing discrimination, poverty, the fragility of a long-distance relationship. This film felt so sorrow and grim, and despite what Lanslow might have intended, the building he designed reflects that. And maybe that's exactly what the movie intended. However, shortly after the film was revealed, David Jankso, the editor behind it, stated that, quote, tweaks were needed to enhance the specific letters of the vocal sounds. It was mainly just replacing letters here and there. According to him, AI was judiciously used to alter the speech of the actors, so that even native Hungarians wouldn't notice any imperfections. He claimed that they tried to use different methods, however, they weren't efficient enough. The film was set for release and the changes were required. But now the question arises, is this really a justified use of AI for a film that later won multiple Oscars awards? Is this really a small technical fix, or is it a betrayal of everything this film stood for? When the story is about pain, exile, and the imperfections of identity, why erase the imperfections of production? When brought up in this light, the explanation as to why AI was used sounds less like dedication to the craft and more like a shortcut to a finished product. But most importantly, AI was used to cover up the actor's human flaws. Previously in cinema, small things like this were always accepted. I mean, it's part of an actor's job to learn and give your best performance. It feels like so much has been put forth into making this fictitious story feel like it really happened. And then it was all compromised because time was short. But let's talk about the movie. Did the use of AI affect it in any harmful way? I don't know what true Hungarian speech should sound like, but when the film delves into Hungarian dialogue/monologue, I wasn't able to notice anything artificial or off-sounding. Everything sounded okay, my viewer experience most certainly wasn't ruined. But I was curious about how these AI changes were implemented, and I think I have a solid theory. Jankso mentioned that because he himself is Hungarian, some lines would be recorded with his voice, that is, he would act it out in Hungarian with the proper native accent. Then, the voices of the actors who were on screen would be recorded as datasets for AI to use, and layered over Jankso's speech to produce a new audio track, spoken in Jankso's Hungarian accent, but with the voices of the actors. Then, because Jankso mentions that they only had to replace certain vowels or syllables, it's pretty safe to assume that this new track would be cut up in places and inserted into the original audio track, to produce a blend of authentically spoken Hungarian by the actors themselves and this new AI edited speech. Now of course, this is all my theory on how it could have been done. I'm not here to tell you this is what actually happened, but I am being pretty reasonable with my claims. So, alright, AI was used to change up the dialogue, but the movie is still largely an authentic human-made effort. Except tweaking audio isn't the only time AI was used in this movie. Yes, you heard me right. Generative AI was also used at the end of the film to produce images of Lanslow's structures for the finale presentation of his work. Jankso claims that the results were of very high quality and allowed the crew to finish up despite the lack of money and time.
What?
Okay. Now this just feels like cutting corners. Sure, the movie still looks and sounds perfectly fine, but this isn't a question about quality anymore. It's about ethics. Because this year the Academy allowed a movie that used AI to make minor tweaks win multiple awards. This gives leeway for future films where AI could be used for more prominent purposes, not tweaking vocals or generating small details, but things like storyboarding, creating parts of soundtracks, and maybe even whole sequences that would just be inserted straight in. The line that separates human arts and artificially curated slop will only keep on blurring, and the worst part is, nobody will ever find out. Nobody has to find out. Jankso chose to be very open about the use of AI in this movie, and he got away with it. His reasoning was somewhat justified, but reality could be that AI has already been used in the industry for plenty other purposes, and it was just never publicized. But now you're probably thinking, if that's the case, then what does it matter to anyone? We still get to enjoy film, and AI is just another tool presented to us by progress of technology. Except AI isn't just any kind of tool. Majority of AI models nowadays have access to the entire World Wide Web to be trained on, accessing data from users that don't suspect it. Even when used ethically, the best functioning AI models require the largest sets of data, and companies tend to just take it from wherever they please. It's a pretty brutal reality, and even if the AI was trained on 100% solicited and private data, that still doesn't justify it being implemented in films like this. Arts have always been about humanity, whether you agree with this or not, it's a fact. Creativity is the product of human minds and hearts, ideas and ways of self-expression. The use of AI takes away from what it means to create authentic ideas, what it means to pay respect to actual human effort. Somebody could have drawn those images for the end of the movie. The actors could have worked more to improve their accents, and even if there were slight flaws in any of those aspects, the audience would still accept it as something true, something real. Lancelot states in the film, "Nothing is of its own explanation. Is there a better description of a cube than that of its own construction?" He puts stress on erasing all forms of impurities from his designs. This trademark aesthetic of brutalist architecture lies in the sense of clarity that's achieved through a precise intention. And if this film was a reflection of brutalism as a style, it failed, because there are parts of it which are synthetic. But let's bring this back to the film itself. I've talked long enough about AI and ethics, and for all the noise this movie has made about its production, is The Brutalist still worth your watch? And my answer to that is yes, because there are truly still a lot of redeemable qualities about this work. You might have already guessed, but the cinematography of this film is truly refreshing. It's amazing at fooling you into thinking that this movie was not only set in the post-war setting, but filmed in the past too. Either through the format or the color grading or the editing or maybe all of the above together. It really replicates the feel of old movies. In a time where most films feel like they were recorded on an iPhone with basic A-roll, B-roll composition, this film stands out as something truly artistic, even with its caveats. And despite the 3.5-hour runtime of this film, visually you don't really ever get bored because the color palette is ever changing. You really sense the passage of time in the story because days turn into nights, sunshine turns into rain, and all of it is somewhat symbolic to what's actually going on in the narrative. And speaking of the narrative, if you're coming into this film expecting a story about architecture and brutalism as a style, you might be a little disappointed. The story doesn't have much to do with what brutalism and modernism are as styles of architecture, but rather it tackles with what sort of context triggered this change. Lancelot's life was honestly quite miserable. His mind was far ahead of society, the world just wasn't ready for his designs, and as a result, the vision he dreamt of was never recognized as monumental, not until he was close to death himself. Throughout his life, he was wronged in many ways, which pushed him to his weaknesses. His close relationships crumbled, he struggled with drug addiction, and despite all of those things, he didn't give up on his work until it was complete. And that sort of paints the mind of an architect, or really any artist like Lancelot, as overtaken or even possessed by their dreams. Lancelot is so dedicated to his craft and his vision that he sees it as something bigger and greater than himself. He allows his circumstances to worsen. When opportunities to turn away and save himself and his family come, he denies them for a chance to witness his work come to life. So despite all of the difficulties and roadblocks, the building Lancelot creates completes construction, a large community center designed with lightness, purity, and good in mind. But as you might have guessed, the trauma and misery that Lancelot went through end up reflecting in his work. The film ends by displaying the building as a gritty maze, an almost alien-like setting, and its verticality with the cross beaming out to the sky end up being anything but holy, anything but freeing, anything but good. Or at the very least, this is exactly how the world sees Lancelot's work. It's not a place where hope and faith can foster. The building is interpreted as a reflection of the horrors that preceded its creation. In many ways, it's brutal. So, yeah, maybe production-wise this film isn't the best representation of the message it tries to convey, but in terms of story, it does exactly what it needs to do. If by the end of this film you feel uneasy, disheartened, or discomforted, then the film has done its job. But what do you think? As usual, let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, help me hit 50k by the end of this year. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next. Oh yeah, also, check out my other videos. They're on screen right now. Check them out. They're good, I think.